Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 101 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I'll get my commercial out of the way. If you're working with Citrix technologies, VMware technologies, Nutanix technologies, if you're working in the end user compute world, you should be considering something other than Windows for the endpoint. And if you're looking for a partner that knows this stuff and can help you with this, and not only sell it to you, but then turn around and support you for, however long you use the technology, then that is XenTegra. And that's why one of the reasons why we do this podcast. I'm joined today with Chris Feeney. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Andy. It is always a pleasure. I know it's been a few weeks since we've gotten a chance to do this again, and like I said, I'm always it's fun to do this, and I'm looking forward to today's topic. So,
I am too. So a little foreshadowing here. We're going to be talking about AI. Imagine that. And I say that because I just came out of the Microsoft Ignite conference from last week, and AI and Copilot was everywhere. And you know what? Rightfully so. I will tell you that I went to the big booth they had there with all the different stations, and they didn't give me this answer, but talking to them made me think through. It's like, what are my challenges? Like one of my challenges, I need an executive assistant. The problem is I can't find one to keep up with what I've got going on. And I started to think, I mean, what could Copilot do for me? And I started saying, well, can it not summarize my emails for the day instead of me having to go through and read them all? It can. Can it summarize my calendar for the day? It can. Can it tell me what's most important from its perspective for me to do today or who I need to follow up with? It can. And it's pretty game changing in terms of my problem, which was, lack of an executive assistant that I could rely on. Copilot and generative AI is going to help me there.
yeah, I think we're all kind of learning where some of these use cases are that will be, productive. Um, and beginning just interestingly enough, so beginning to kind of use Copilot, for example, to just see, hey, what's out there in my daughter's field that she studied. For example, she's looking for career opportunities, and we're looking at, and AI is returning some interesting things depending on the search, but then also learning, hey, what other things can this thing do? Such as what you just is a great example. We both get gobs of emails. Some of that is ignorable spam kind of stuff, and then there's actual important stuff that you don't want to miss. Learning to use a tool that can help, keep it top of mind. And I think those types of things will rise to the top, but certainly net new things that nobody really thought of, but a tool like AI can certainly bring to the table going forward. So.
So one of
Uh,
the big things last week at Ignite was the idea of the endpoint itself participating in the AI journey in terms of, I guess maybe having some of the information local, not having to go back into the cloud. And so today you brought a blog forward. It's called "Entering the AI Era at the Endpoint" with iGel, not Windows, but iGel and Lenovo. And I'm very curious as to what this means. This is a conversation that happened from IGEL Disrupt in Munich in 2024, earlier this year. And this is written by James Housecott. So September of this year. Chris, why this blog?
It's certainly this past year, I mean, really the beginning of the year and through the middle and then of course what you just mentioned last week, I think we're beginning to enter this new era where AI is becoming a thing. And as I've started looking into it, you've got obviously the processors, right? The different types of processors that can, handle the workloads that are being done by AI, whether it's in the data center, but now those things beginning to show up down to the endpoint. And when I think it was earlier this year, maybe at I don't know, probably somewhere between May and July, I think it actually might have been March. Microsoft announced, the Copilot PC or something like that. And as I read into the details, I think it was around the security conference, the RSA one, looking at kind of what problem they're trying to solve there, right? Offloading processing down to the endpoint. So you have to have a PC device that has that capability. And then, of course, the ones we carry with us, the phones, beginning to see some AI type functionality with those tools. So I think beginning to see some scenarios where hey, the hardware and the software beginning to come together, and now you're going to see some opportunities there to try to leverage the power of the endpoint, whether it's in business environment or consumer based. And so Lenovo is certainly a big partner of ours. has been focusing on this as well with their endpoint hardware. And so this was an opportunity to say, hey, this is the beginning stages of where things are going. And so figured, hey, we're getting ready to turn the corner into a new year. Here's an interesting topic, sort of hits upon a theme for the year to some degree, and I think it's only going to hear more about it heading into the years to come.
So, Chris, but how does that impact the endpoint story? And sorry if I missed that, but like the endpoint becoming a major player in the AI portion.
So I think what's interesting there, I was wondering the same, right? Because in the story you just told, right, data on the endpoint. Can AI do something with data on the endpoint? Well, in the IGEL scenario, where from a security perspective, there's no data on the endpoint for AI, generally speaking, to process essentially. Um, and but there are scenarios where we're beginning to see like, hey, can AI be used where it can, like in a zero trust model, determine based on various scenarios and then take action? Maybe that detects that you're, for example, um, already in a different location. You travel quite a bit, and then because of that, maybe some posture is taken to secure that device or put additional security around it, whatever it might be based on that type of information. And then of course, performance, right? Maybe leveraging some of these combinations, right? So there's been obviously a big focus since you just came from Ignite, the Microsoft solution there, and they, about a year or so ago, plus maybe a year and a half ago, they announced Azure Stack HCI to the world and public preview, that type of thing. And so it's gone through its own iterations. They just renamed it. I think that was one of the announcements last week. So it's now something Azure Local, whatever it is. But they certainly see the future of combining those things. Lenovo certainly provides both solutions for the data center and the endpoint.
Yeah.
And so they were there. I don't know if you had a chance to spot by their booth, but they were there kind of talking through some of that last week as well.
No, but I did have a ton of conversations around Azure Local, aka Azure Stack.
Right.
But the conversations there, I mean, this whole conversation starts to make sense. So it's not necessarily that IGEL and Lenovo will be executing AI on the endpoint. That's possible as the two companies work together. I mean, the hardware is there. It's just a matter of whether how we blend, how we put that into the IGEL operating system. However, uh, it makes tons of sense just right out of the gate that if customers are looking for AI either at the endpoint or better yet in this conversation at the edge, aka not in the cloud, then the Azure Stack story for a company like Lenovo that has both the endpoint and the Azure Stack, Azure Local, has both of those pieces. It starts to make sense how this becomes possible very quickly.
Yeah, and I think just like beginning to find you know use cases for an AI type tool, I think those will begin to emerge, especially as we collaborate with our hardware and software partners. And in the iGel endpoint story, we certainly don't do it alone, but um, what sort of scenarios maybe it's like when we discuss, like for example, we detect that there's some issue going on the device and a ticket is automatically opened up because of that to give visibility before the user even has to open up a ticket. Maybe it's something like that as a starting point, leveraging uh, a tool that most customers have, or maybe it's an alert that goes into their analytics tool, uh, so that the user sees somebody reaching out and say, "Hey, we detected that there's an issue," right? This is all stuff that potential for AI kind of smarts, if you will, having a tool at the endpoint. Not necessarily processing data, to offload it from the data center, but detecting what's happening on the endpoint and then taking action.
Yeah.
Those are just some examples that I'm thinking about.
Well, that helps me because I'm thinking about Copilot and asking questions and user generated AI stuff. I guess there's a ton, and I mean a ton more AI related things that can happen just from the software hardware interacting than I wasn't even thinking about.
Yeah, and of course layering in, we've got some conversations around like zero trust model, right? Users that are in or out or different circumstances apply. AI kind of taking some smarts and putting a grade on that device or whatever, where now um, the device automatically reconfigures itself because it detects that, hey, where there's an issue going on or whatever it might be, or some kind of intelligence in the background. These are all certainly ideas, but for example, like you know if I travel, I know that if I enter a new country, for example, and I go to try to hit igel.com resources, it's going to know that I'm in some other place and it may deny me access until I get either an exception for that particular trip, for example, or you might use a tool that routes your traffic through a secure known place, and maybe that's a private access, internet access kind of thing, right? Something that will secure that traffic, and it knows that if I need to pull up company resources in some other location, it's doing it with some kind of trust model in place, or zero trust model, should. So these are all just ideas of that I'm thinking of, and a lot of it is still exploring like what capabilities does AI bring, and more specifically, the hardware and the hardware devices that are coming out to take advantage of some of this new technology.
So, Chris, the last paragraph in that section says leveraging the strengths of the IGEL preventative security model. That's the concern about AI is, what are we opening ourselves up from a security perspective? How does the IGEL positioning of its security model impact the ability to not only still do AI, but do it in a secure way?
Well, I think, you look at some of the fundamentals, right? The PSM is really, the posture of the device, right? There's no local data. I mean, if that device gets stolen or something, is there anything on there that could be used to, compromise that machine or a company in some cases? And so now layer in other components to that PSM. Maybe it's in the case of Lenovo, you got everything from the BIOS all the way up. If something were to try to modify that, the PSM model is built upon detecting those types of things, and so deeply integrating with obviously with Lenovo, they make devices that come from the factory, depending on the models, with IGEL already pre-installed. And then, so sort of a chain of trust, if you will, all the way from the manufacturing place to the underlying um, BIOS itself, essentially, and then the layers on top of that. Um, and then, um, primarily what we get users into is either a DAS or a SaaS, type environment. What data are you accessing, right? And then layering in um, uh, security on top of those things, be it MFA, single sign-on technology, something that, helps us identify securely that the user, or more specifically, with the conference last week, Microsoft, we now, I think we have announced it, but an Intune app where you can have that register, and now if I want to launch into AVD, for example, with the Intune, it's already registered, and before it lets me in, it knows that, all right, that device is now attached, and I have visibility and controlling that particular person. So I think these are the types of integrations that are beginning to emerge. um, Same thing, like if I'm going to use Edge on the endpoint, before I can log into my company resources, an app like Intune registering and making sure that that device is, uh, you know, uniquely tied to XenTegra or IGEL or whatever it might be, some company.
Yeah.
And I think going forward, um, are there other AI type, or just some other end user capabilities that you can bring on top of those things, leveraging the combination of the hardware and software approach?
Yeah. Chris, the last section here talks about expanded collaboration between IGEL, Lenovo, and Microsoft is what's enabling this. You want to cover where it makes sense that IGEL and Microsoft are working? It's kind of been woven in throughout our conversation so far, but where does it make sense that Microsoft is supporting another operating system being successful in this?
Yeah, so more recently, so Microsoft, they provide an SDK for us that we leverage and build around. And they recently provided an update to that earlier this summer or earlier this year that we tested and then released into the different types of Microsoft clients that we have. And it's more or less what's called the Microsoft Authentication Library, so more advanced authentication, right? And in the case of one particular industry, verticals, if you will, U.S. federal, it included smart card authentication, meaning, the types of cards, the CAC and the PIV cards that you would use to access unclassified or even classified environments. And so, so we've integrated with that. We have customers actively testing that right now. And so that involves some deep collaboration behind the scenes between our engineering team working with theirs as well. And then we also had a scenario where there was an update Microsoft pushed out, and they then had to come back and give us an update to the SDK rather quickly because of some change that allowed us to address a situation where a customer's AVD is going through essentially a private VPN connection, a dedicated VPN. I'm trying to remember the name of that, but they had modified that for whatever reason. I don't remember the reasoning, but they jointly got together and realized, yeah, we need to update that, and so we were able to quickly turn that around um, and update our integration with them. So it's a very collaborative partnership as well as additional net new things that they're delivering. For example, take the cloud PC. They've added some functionality around the product they call Frontline, which is sharing in some cases a license among different users. But they also announced a more recent one last week called it's like the difference between persistent and non-persistent VDI. If that conversation that we've had, so Microsoft announced a cloud PC, essentially a non-persistent shared whatever, I can't remember the name of it, but basically in the case they use retail, I'm on the retail floor and I normally go into my cloud PC where I can pull up my stuff, but then I have to walk around the corner and I just want to pull up a generic cloud PC and get to access and something like that, check inventory, and then when I'm done, none of that is saved, but there's a use case for it. So there's some additional functionality around that we'll be integrating with our cloud PC app in the near future. A lot of that is again in collaboration with Microsoft.
Okay. Well, that makes a ton of sense. Let me summarize what you just said, I think.
Yeah.
Um, Microsoft don't care. Like they do not care how you get there as long as you end up in a virtual desktop or app, but desktop coming from Azure. And this creates yet another mechanism for getting there where AI can be successfully executed and potentially very much more secure. And at the end of the day, if that workload runs in Windows 365 or with an AVD, they're happy.
Yeah, I think I mean certainly, what I've seen is I mean and I'm sure you've experienced this too, right? The Windows OS is ubiquitous. I mean, it's pretty much out there on the majority of devices. I don't have the actual numbers, but over the course of time, across 30 plus years of that, if you're a software vendor, even Microsoft, you're generally going to add feature functionality to a client or app, whatever, for Windows. But what's also happened in that same time frame is certainly where IGEL comes into play is there are now other options. And so customers who want to choose that other option on the endpoint means, they require and demand, if you will, the market demands collaboration between these other vendors. And so Microsoft has certainly seen as you just look at like what Microsoft apps are natively available for Linux, right? Edge is one of those examples, a small example, but a popular browser, they made it available as a Linux app. We now have that available as well. So, um, um, but generally speaking, they'll like last week they announced this new shared thing. We're going to get that. It's just waiting on them to provide it, and then we'll quickly adapt it and then provide an update. So, um, but I think that collaborative partnership, I'd say the same thing for Mac, right? I'm sure that probably same update is probably coming for folks that want to use a Mac on the endpoint to access a Windows-based backend or whatever.
Yeah. Well, Chris, what did we miss? What did we not cover?
I think from the terms of this blog, I think we kind of hit upon all the key things. I think we've obviously got since this blog was written, we've announced the IGEL Now and Next event coming up in Miami next year at the end of March. And so there are, well, since we're on a blog, we have a Black Friday sale going on for folks that want to register. And certainly through partners like yourselves, there are opportunities to get, is it a 90% discount? What are you guys doing for that?
If you're the right person, or anybody gets 90%. If you're the right person, it's free.
Yeah,
Xentegra doesn't need a sell. We're always selling this stuff. We're always positioning clients. And I think what you guys are trying to do with this conference, it's not necessarily an IGEL conference, it's an end user compute industry conference that I
correct.
was trying to lead and help get set up. But I've talked to people already say, oh, I don't want to go to IGEL conference. It's not an IGEL conference, it's an industry conference. It's the replacement for Citrix Synergy, which was always Citrix, but at the same time, it was the industry's conference.
Yeah, and I think certainly as things are lining up, we're doing a lot of preparation for it now. But there is an opportunity to take advantage of a discounted rate if you want to. Certainly, if you should most definitely go. We're going to be announcing some very cool things, of course, in collaboration with some of the partners, some of which we just mentioned. But keep that on your calendars. At the end of March. I believe it's the 25th, 27th, or whatever the dates are here.
Yeah, I had you on hold a little bit ago. What I'm doing is I'm promoting both the IGEL and the Nutanix conferences, both happening early next year. If you either one of those interest you, let your XenTegra salesperson know. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you don't have a XenTegra salesperson, but we want you there. We took 20 customers ish to Microsoft Ignite last week, and spending time with them and building rapport and entertaining them and helping them learn was just we haven't had that opportunity really since the pandemic to do a lot of that, and it was just magical, and it kind of re-energized me.
Yeah, you even got some snow out of it too, I think, right?
Yeah, a little snow. That didn't help.
Um,
It was the
but
excitement.
uh, but there will be no snow in Miami in March. So the Fontainebleau, an iconic location. Lots of famous things have occurred there, but that is the location at the end of March. It is the 25th, the 27th, and we would love as many people to join us there as possible.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I appreciate the time. I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving with the family, and we'll do it again in a few weeks.
All right. Thanks, Andy. Take care.